It's interesting too because in a very different space. I think the Web3 space and the dynamics that you're looking at are very different than I think what Peter Thiel is commenting on. But in his famous kind of 0 to 1 book and series of lectures, he focuses on this idea that competition is for losers because you compete away your resources. And instead, businesses should seek to have monopolies. And it sounds like you're actually invoking a similar concept, right? It's like if we can be dedicated kind of structures and that provide inputs to something else and allow for better coordination, then there's more efficiency and then probably better resulting allocation as well, or at least the opportunity to better allocate.
Yeah, and I always have to give a shout out to Kevin Owocki for really like opening my eyes to a lot of this. And when he first introduced me to the word hyperstructure, the example that he used was Uniswap. And Uniswap is not like a particularly social impact flavor of a public good, although it does create efficiencies that you could say there is like an impact to that make like by making it easier to move value around, there is a positive externality to that. But that the value of it is the access to exchange of value. The value isn't like a token. The value is the function that it's providing to the
Mm-hmm.
ecosystem. And when I grokked that, I was like, oh, so this is a different way of thinking about value. It's not about like I'm going to create this like walled garden like Facebook, and your attention is the commodity that I'm trying to extract as much of as possible. I am providing value to you just by allowing you to do something, and I don't need to enclose that in order for it to be valuable. And so I've been using the phrase civic hyperstructures to describe the value that's created when you empower communities to directly take responsibility for their own well-being. And that that value can't be captured in the same way that you would with like a monopolistic product, um, that's like boxing out alternatives. But nevertheless, it's maybe some of the most valuable things that can be created. And it's that kind of blue sky thinking that's more about like the legacy of the impact that we're leaving behind us than it is about creating like the next Facebook. And I really want to see innovators and tech builders starting to shift that mindset where yeah, anyone can build a cool tech product that like encloses people into a walled garden. Like that, we've seen people build empires around that. They all get bought up by the big three tech companies, and you get your exit, and like, cool, you can go buy a bunker for the end of the world. But like, do you want to leave a world that's better off for your kids? Like, you can actually build technology and tools that there is no real exit, but the exit is actually like a viable human future. And that actually there's something flipping in people's minds to be able to orient to trying to create that level of value, that scale level of scaling that's not about enclosure. It's about this sort of blue sky innovation mindset.
Yeah. So one of the challenges that I've been having is thinking about like when we're thinking about a company and the kinds of tools that we use when we're building companies or walled gardens, or basically closed competitive organizations versus open cooperative organizations. Um, I have the problem of thinking like all of the tools are built for the purpose of capturing market, capturing profit, capturing revenue, capturing all of the things. And so when you're building open cooperative, there's no way, how do you capture those things? How do you capture enough even to be maintainable, and so A, is that something that you're running into, or B, how are you approaching that? Or what do you think of this?
I have one friend in particular who's building a really incredible social platform called Social Roots. And their philosophy is cooperative sourcing. So instead of fully open sourcing, they're open sourcing to anyone who's a cooperative, which just ensures a kind
Hmm.
of values alignment in the way that the IP is shared because we are still swimming in this extractive landscape. And so if you're completely open, someone could just copy what you're doing, but like make it a little bit sexier UI, UX, and then funnel
Mm-hmm.
people into a closed ecosystem. And so there are definitely sort of game theoretic ways of like gaming out the how to navigate being in a win-lose game dynamic while trying to aim for an omni-win game dynamic. We're in a kind of a bridge moment here where people who are trying to play all win can actually get taken out by people who are playing to win and have other people lose. Um, but I also think if you're focusing on markets that are really underserved because it's impossible to commodify them, like, you know, I have seen some projects that are trying to create a mutual credit platform that's extractive when like mutual credit has this opportunity of being like so liberatory for a community, but having like a PayPal version of mutual credit. um, but ultimately, I think the products that will win in this new landscape will win because of their values alignment, not because they capture the market. That's like the hypothesis, at least. Yeah, there's no really good answer to that question though.
No, no, no. I mean, that's actually a really cool start. I mean, basically, it's still closed competitive within the values, group within the cohort, within the cohort that shares a set of values. Which is, I think that's, I think that's a cool idea. Something I want to think about some more. I think I've been stumbling onto that myself, but without having been exposed to it. You know.
I have a follow-up to that then. Maybe to put it in practical terms for some people in this ecosystem, how do people support a family? Right? How do they have enough income that they're not going from grant to grant or, just like, trying to win bounties at hackathons and things like that? How do we move towards a system? And what does that look like in terms of like where we're at now, 5 years, 10 years, how do you see us getting there? And I know there's a smaller question than a bigger question there.
Yeah, I mean, this is the conundrum of living in between worlds, and
Mm,
then people who are building for the world that's coming. I know this for myself. It's been a long haul of feeling really under resourced because sometimes I feel like the value I'm creating isn't even legible to the legacy system. But with these signals that I was describing in the very beginning, I'm starting to see that actually, like, based on how dire things are getting in the world, there's more and more people who are realizing, okay, yeah, we don't need another band-aid. We can't keep focusing on business as usual. We need to start the transition now. And that starts with like a different way of doing business and a different way of looking at impact. And so that those people who are kind of leading the edge on that transition, we will probably end up needing to compost capital where, you know, people who have won the current game, they have an outsized amount of resource that's only stacking on itself exponentially at this point. So we're at this stage where the wealth gap is the greatest it's ever been, and it only gets bigger each year. And the pandemic made it even more exponentially, just even more of an exponential rate. And so we are going to need people who've won that game to transition some of the capital that they've accumulated into new systems. And the people who are building those systems will need to probably receive that as grants. The goal, however, is to compost that capital by investing it into closed loop systems where once that value has transitioned into another system, it has its own circularity to it. And so I've always felt that the wealth that I want to be wealthy. I think it's okay to want to be wealthy. I don't want to be wealthy in extractive businesses. I don't want to be wealthy in fiat currency. I want to be wealthy in community currencies of communities that I have served, that I've created a really positive impact in. And and that's where it could become lucrative to be on this leading edge. It may not be for some period of time for innovators who are working at this edge, but imagine if you are at the beginning of Bitcoin. Those people now have yachts and Lambos. Imagine being at the beginning of 1,000 community currencies all over the United States or wherever you live, and being able to help spin up local economies that actually empower workers to own the surplus value of their own labor through owning their own cooperative as a DAO locally, and doing commerce in a local community currency where that value stays in the community. It doesn't get sucked up like a straw to the Walmarts or the Targets or um, the big multinationals. That could actually be lucrative for people who are building these things, but you're not going to see that upside until the transition into a new system is complete. And so you're going to have to be doing it for the right reasons in order to even get to that point where you might see an upside, because you're not doing it for the upside. You're doing it because this is the future that we want to leave behind for our kids.